Hello, it's been a while that I've actually talked to the camera. How have you been? Yeah, a lot's going on at the moment. I am, as of filming this, I will probably be uploading it later. I'm just sort of like batching videos so I don't go AWOL as soon as the stores start opening and everything goes back to normal. Yeah, I'm currently in quarantine during the big old pandemic that's going on at the moment. I'm not going to talk about that too much, I've talked about it in other videos, but yeah, I'm still currently furloughed with my job. But today's video isn't going to be about that or about my job, it is about cosplay, which is one of my main hobbies. Today we're going to be adding to my series of how to cosplay. Today's video is going to be about how to detailed deconstruct a costume. In the previous video we did a baseline of how to deconstruct a costume, but today we're going to go into a lot of detail and I'm going to have examples and it's going to be a big old time. So yeah, so as I said in the first video, costumes should fit into categories for each sort of element of the costume. As you can see in this example, basically what you're going to want to do is strip down the elements like the wig, the contact lenses, the makeup, the shirt, the jacket, the props, the accessories, pants, shoes, anything that's on that costume that distinctively makes that character look like that character, write it down next to a picture of them. Usually what I will do is I will get one of these, like, draw myself like a little dolly cutout like I've drawn here, or you can also just get one online. It's quite easy to find them, like just like fashion doll and stuff like that. Just put that in and you should be able to get these like little naked people that you can sketch the costume onto. You don't have to really have any art skill to do this, it's literally just copying and it's very like rough. You just need to have a basic idea of what it looks like. At this point I usually take the costume and I put it into its basis levels. So I take, say, the jacket and I will separate that element into things I can do to make it. So at this point I will usually go, okay, so say I'm using Hawks. Let's go on to Hawks. Hawks' jacket is a aviator jacket, like kind of almost like a Sherpa jacket, but not. It's got this like white hood, it's got this like white collar and this tan beigey fabric. So I also pick out at this point stuff like buttons, embellishment, attachments, stuff like that. Just checking if they're there and if they're visible, because if there isn't a visible attachment or anything like that, I will then address that later on in the deconstruction. I will also look at the sizing it is on the person. A lot of the time the costume will usually fit the character, but sometimes, like again in Hawks' case, the jacket is really loose on him, so it doesn't fit him very well, so I would probably make it a size up just to reference his body proportions. I think this is done to make him look smaller, because he's a very short, quite like little character in the anime and manga. Otherwise with Hawks, there's a lot of guesswork. There's less now because the manga has been updated again, but when I filmed this, the manga had not been updated and we had not seen him with his jacket off properly. But he has a sort of like t-shirt length undershirt, and that is made out of definitely like a spandex. It's very tight. And it's got these like white lines going across it. The white lines I'm probably going to do with piping, I think, but we don't need to super decide how we're going to do it at this point. We're just going to go, okay, so like this is the shirt that I need to make, and then we're going to have the like details on there. So sketch those onto your little mannequin and there we go, that's the jacket. I also look at stuff like commonly seen with them props. Hawks, I'm definitely going to have to make wings. So at this point I would decide, one, whether or not I want to do the little baby version of his wings or the really big version of his wings. I would also decide if I want to do his visor. He's got this like little visor thing, and headphones and stuff like that. I'm probably going to do the full version of him, but a lot of these like elements and stuff you can choose to skip out on, and if you're a cosplayer who's maybe not as experienced, I would probably recommend doing stuff like his baby version of his wings, or making choices like not having the visor or headset. When I'm deconstructing a costume, as you can see, I stick down a ton of pictures of them. With the pictures that I actually use, I'm trying to collect references that all show different elements of his costume in a better detail than the other images. So I'm choosing images that either show the back of his garments, that show his wings in detail, that show the visor in detail, and just anything that can help me further my deconstruction of the costume. I don't really just put pictures down because they're interesting or I like them. I will only put them down if I think that they can help me in some element of creating this costume. At this point as well, I choose usually to deconstruct the wig as well, but I will not deconstruct the makeup or contact lenses and stuff like that until I've already done all of this stage. And I will do a video that's separate about contact lenses, makeup and such, but at this point I deconstruct the wig also. The hair is probably the most distinct part of a costume. If you can get the wig right, you could probably wear any other piece of clothing and people would still recognise who you were. Particularly with characters from Boku no Hero, a lot of the characters have got very, very, very distinct hair, and due to being able to do that, you can at least show which character you're trying to do, even if you want to do like a closet cosplay of them. So wigs are a really important part. So for Hawks, I realised quite quickly I needed to get a lace front wig because his hairline is up off of his head. He's got like these prongs that go back. It's almost a little bit similar to All Might's, but like a lot floppier. And his hair is quite curly. I knew I would not be able to find a wig like that, so I knew how to style one. So I brought a lace front wig that goes down to about here and has a longer fringe. And the reason I've done that is because I want the longer fringe to be able to work with for the hair prongs, and the back of it I want to be able to curl it. So I've got enough room there to be able to actually curl those back parts of the wig and not have it become so short it doesn't look accurate. I'm also hoping to take some styling in with this, with stuff like I'd like to darken the roots just a little bit on the wig, but that again I will get to when I do my entire video on styling my Hawks wig. But these are choices that you can choose to make while deconstructing a costume. Obviously the wings are something I'm going to address briefly. If this is your first costume, do not do something like making wings. It's just not worth it. I would honestly, if you want to do Hawks as your first ever costume, just don't do the wings, don't do them at all. I would just leave them. Most people who I've seen who have done Hawks online and stuff to take pictures, they've not had the wings at all. And people who I've seen at conventions had a tendency to either have bought a pair of wings, which you can do, you can buy wings and they are like, you can get them at any range, so like starting at like £10 to like 3,000 from ones I've seen online. But if you're wanting to make your costume yourself, I probably would just recommend not getting the wings at all if it's your very first costume. But I am choosing to make the wings, so as a cosplayer who is a little bit more experienced, I've been cosplaying for over 10 years, I will be choosing to make them entirely from scratch, and I am choosing to make them move. This is a little bit more difficult, and I would probably only recommend trying something like that if you're a little bit more experienced as a cosplayer. But as this video is based around starting out cosplaying or learning a new technique from cosplay, I would really not even go into too much detail on the wings. Just know that they are an option that you could choose to make if you see a character who does have things like wings or a tail or something like that. It is something you could choose to make, but I would recommend buying for your very first costume or just leaving them off the costume completely. I will then go on to my Fenris content. I filmed my deconstruction of Fenris, so you can see this here. Fenris is a much different kind of costume because while Hawks is mainly relying on his wings to be the most probably impressive part of the costume, Fenris is definitely the armour and the sword. Fenris also takes a fair amount of makeup because he does have tattoos going across all of his skin. These tattoos are something I'm going to get into a little bit of detail with, but let's start with the actual costume. Fenris is wearing a lot of armour, so he is probably one of the more difficult costumes to deconstruct. I recommend, if you're going to do an armour piece, again, get one of these little fashion dolls, and I would draw onto that the armour so you can have a proper understanding of where each piece of armour falls, because Fenris's armour is in several different bits and kind of really confusing, honestly. A lot of people have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what his actual armour is made of or looks like, especially the feather bits that are on the top of his shoulders. A lot of people don't understand those, and I don't 100% understand those, honestly, but I'm going to make them as part of the actual armour. Some people do choose to just literally use feathers. But with armour pieces, I always recommend doing this. I really recommend just like sketching out the armour, even if you have no drawing skills at all, just trying to get a base idea of what it looks like on the body, because otherwise you're going to start trying to make this and you're going to have no idea what you're doing. Take it as advice from me, who has made armour multiple times. The biggest armour pieces and stuff I've done though have only been Genji and Hanzo from Overwatch, the young skins, but yeah, I went into those having not deconstructed the armour at all, and it was hell. I had to remake it about 4 times, and then on the 4th time I did completely deconstruct the armour, and it was so much easier once I actually knew what it was supposed to look like. Once I actually knew what elements I had to draw, I knew what elements I had to cut out. You will save money, you will save your foam. The foam is so expensive, it can get really steep, the foam that I used for that armour particularly, or Warbler if you're going to work with that. Warbler is very expensive. Just conserve your materials and actually deconstruct things properly. Please, your bank account will thank you. There are other choices as well on Fenris. His wig is very spiky. He's got this like really sharp, almost kind of anime looking hairstyle, and it is like a white grey. Again, I tried to make life harder for myself, and I'm going to gradient dye a white wig, because I'm going to put some like grey into a white wig, but you could definitely just use a grey silver wig and it would look great. He also has prosthetics, which I've not touched on yet, but prosthetics are things that you have to add on to your body to make it look more like that character. Prosthetics, usually, people are referring to stuff like elf ears and, I'm trying to think of another prosthetic I see a lot, scales, things like that. Anything that makes you look more similar to the character, but you have to add onto your body. I'm going to make elf tip ears, and I'm also going to hopefully make a prosthetic for this bridge part of my nose, because he has a very straight bridge, like it literally goes from his brow bone down to the tip of his nose. I'm going to make a prosthetic for that because it's a very distinct part of the elf characters in this. They have this really flat nose bridge. I will say here, Fenris is a completely different skin tone to me. For this reason, I want to just briefly touch on that if you are a white person, I would not darken your skin tone for a character, ever. Just don't. Unless they are completely a non-human skin tone, so something like blue, or something like that. I just wouldn't do it. It's culturally insensitive, and it upsets people, and you don't want to do stuff like that. It's just something you shouldn't be touching on. It's just still a very sensitive topic to a lot of people, and I really just wouldn't do that. Also, it's not necessary. Lots and lots of people cosplay characters who aren't their skin tone, and it's not an issue. Just cosplay a character because you love them, and do not try and mimic actual races. Real races, do not try and mimic them with paints or any kind of that kind of stuff. Just don't caricature people's races. But back on topic, as I bring up the dark skin thing, he has silver tattoos, and silver tattoos do not show up very well on light-skinned people. That might be different for different people, but my skin tone particularly, silver just doesn't show up on really, especially in photo shoots and stuff, so I'm hoping to do his tattoos more with like a UV thing, or if I can figure out how to, have them light up, but that is something that I'm going to work on later on when I choose to eventually do Fenris. But the tattoos are a big part of the costume, and I would also consider those prosthetics, or maybe if you're doing it in a different way, you would consider them makeup. But that's an important part of the character, and it's always really, really important to get down all of the things that are really important to that character. Fenris also has like gauntlet gloves. You want to deconstruct those really detailed because gloves are a really difficult part of armour. So make sure you get all of the little joints in the armour figured out, because otherwise you will not be able to move your hand. All of the armour stuff that I'm telling you, I will do an entire video on armour, but an amazing resource for armour is Kamui Cosplay. She is a god. She's a god of armour. I actually met her very briefly at a convention, literally probably about 6 years ago in the UK. She came all the way to the UK to do a talk, and I was enraptured and fell in love instantly, and that's where my love of doing armour costumes actually came from. And literally everything I know about armour comes from that woman. She's incredible, and I definitely recommend just going to her channel if you want a more detailed explanation on any element to armour. She does do videos that aren't based around armour, but her armour videos are just the next level. Very, very, very talented person. Also, she has corgis, and who doesn't want to watch a video with corgis in it? And finally with Fenris, Fenris has a prop. He has a big, 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 big sword. This sword is like the same size or bigger than him. It's enormous, and it is a prop which, if you are wanting to add a little bit extra to your costume, you could definitely make a sword or any kind of prop. Props are a really fun way to have something to pose with when you're getting into your costume, especially if you're going to a convention. It's really nice to have a prop so that you've got something to hold. You don't necessarily need them for literally any costume. I can't think of a single costume where you 100% need a prop, but props really help you to be able to have something cool to pose with. One of the biggest things that I struggled with when I was doing my Suicide Squad Gentleman Harley was the posing, because it's a really weird costume to pose as. But I had my baseball bat, which I'd made as a prop, and that was the most amazing prop to have, because literally every pose I used, I had that thing in my hand, and it made life so much easier. So if you're stuck for poses, or if you're particularly thinking that poses aren't your real strong point, making a prop to go with is a really good way. I will do an entire video on props. I'm not going to go into huge detail on this, but they're very similar to in armour. So around the time I do the armour video, I will be doing a prop video too. There's going to be lots of videos in this little group. We're only on 4, although I am like amazed that we've got 4 done. I will also have a basic idea at this point of what fabrics I'd like to use. Maybe not specifics, but I'll be like, oh, is this a stretch fabric? Is this a spandex? Is this a leather? Is this like a faux fur? What am I working with here? It gives you like a basic idea of how stiff the fabric is a lot of the time, or like how hard wearing it needs to be and stuff. Hawks and Fenris are really good comparisons, because Hawks' outfit is meant to look like an aviator costume. So I would then look at what actual aviator costumes are made of, pulling back to one of my earlier videos, which is the referencing video. And Fenris, I will look at the sort of era, time period that it's kind of set in, this like fantasy era. I will look at like the kind of fabrics they would have access to. And I will try and use as similar fabrics as I can for that. But again, fabrics, patterns, all that kind of stuff, they will be in later videos. This is just a beautiful look at how to deconstruct a costume so you know what you're actually working with. And you should have like a detailed list now of all of the elements to your costumes, as well as a pretty little visual of what you're supposed to be making. You'll actually understand what you've got to make, and that's the most important part, because if you don't understand what you're making, you're going to mess up at some point. Trust me. So thanks for tuning in this week. I know things are all over the place at the moment and everyone's a bit stressed, but I hope you guys are doing okay. I am wishing you well from still currently being in the quarantine as I speak. So thanks for tuning in this week, thanks for learning how to cosplay with me, and next week we're going to be learning budgeting and time planning and time management. That sounds really boring, but I promise it's not. It's a really, really interesting part of cosplay, and time management is one of my favourite elements, because I am a lister, I am a planner. Like, just here I have 2 different planning books. And these aren't even like cosplay planning books, these are my YouTube video and daily plans. So believe me when I say I'm meticulous about my time planning and my time management, and budgeting is very important, because if you're starting out with cosplay you probably don't have that much spare money. If you do, congrats, but if you don't, it's a really, really good thing to figure out where it's best to be putting money into the costume and where it's best to be maybe saving a little bit more money. As always, thank you very, very much, and remember to be creepy.